Yeah, it's kind of spontaneous, so I don't really have any.
Cool. There was a recent event in Charlotte County, which is the county above where I live in Florida, and it was a big guy. Like, he actually called the police, but you could see there he was a sovereign citizen. You just tell there's like a little bit of mental like issues.
Yeah.
And he called originally, and then he had a warrant, and then they tried to take him into custody. And there's 2 cops originally, then 3 cops, and 4 cops. But like, they went batons, taser twice. When he went down, they tried to drive some. They had back mount, like they were working separately. They only had one guy connected to him at the time, reliance on the taser. And the guy's a big guy. He's probably like 6'4", like 250, 260. Yeah. Ends up getting back up. The player pushes him back down. He's on his back, but like only one guy tries to hold him down, and because everyone's like reliant on these tools, he has no weapons in his hands. Yeah. And then he gets up, and they spread out. And one has a taser, one has a baton, and like one has the gun out. And then 4th guy comes up with like beanbag rounds, a beanbag shotgun round, plugs this dude like 3-4 times with a beanbag shotgun round.
That's the one you posted recently, right? With the shot,
And he just runs, and then he runs at the cop with the gun out and grabs the cop's gun. So now they end up shooting this guy that was unarmed, and now it's justified because he grabbed the gun. Yeah. But could we have used good tactics to de-escalate that in the tactics phase? Sure, like 3 guys holding a guy down on his back shouldn't be. I mean, you should be able to hold most people down with 3 guys if you do it correctly, right? Like, hey, post one guy on the head and one guy like on the chest to chest or knee on top, and one guy posting on the legs. Like, you know, could we have used team tactics to, you know, understand how to actually use de-escalation above verbal? Because verbal commands fail, which it did. Now we have to use tactics, and they're just taser reliant, ASP reliant, all less lethal options reliant. They failed, and it almost like it forced it into a deadly physical force shooting where like if they would have had more hands-on skills, could have saved somebody's life. Yeah. You know, and who knows? Maybe he grabs a gun and points at the cop and kills the cop because it saved his life if that was the case, right? But still, like, the guy's got issues, and but like, you don't want to have to shoot people if you don't have to shoot people. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, and then like, first of all, tools, they can always fail.
Yes, they always do fail.
And then like, what if you get into a situation where it's like, okay, now you have a guy who has like, who's charged a cop, maybe he's pinned him down, and you have a gun, you could shoot the guy, but maybe you shoot the cops, and like, and you don't know how to like engage.
Crossfire is a real issue in police work, right? We talk about all the time, like, they're always in crossfires because they don't ever train moving too. Like, that's just another aspect of like tactics. Like, it's crazy. Or like, you see these cops that go up on opposite sides of the car. I fucking hate it. Yeah. It's because we're automatically in a crossfire if we're getting a shooting.
Yeah. So like, how much of that, like, how much of that training how much of that do you think is, because normally like when I see like those types of situations, like, first of all, there's the hands-on training. So like cops that don't understand how to like engage somebody physically, like just with their hands, just due to lack of training, like
that is altogether. That's the biggest lack of training. And if you look at percentages across the board of what each department utilizes, and you pulled all the use of forces, once they have to use force, okay, the overwhelming amount is going to be solved hands-on. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, I can reference like New York City, for instance, like their quarter 1 and 2 stats, somewhere around 17 to 2,000 times they used hands-on. They only used their handgun 8 times in quarter 1, 2 times, or 10 times in quarter 2. Yeah. Right? They used their taser like 300 times in quarter 1, 400 times. But hands-on were 1,700 and 2,000. Like, there's no argument of what we do most and what we train the less. Yeah. What we train the least is hands-on stuff, but that solves the majority of it, right? Yeah. Like, it's going to solve the majority. We're not a weapons base. We wear weapons, but like in this this class, one of the things I ask in the beginning is like, raise your hand if you've tased more than 5 people in your career. Very rarely do I get people that raise their hand more than 5 times. Yeah. Like, I might get 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. Raise your hand if you've shot more than 5. Nobody raises their hand because civilian policing, you usually don't shoot more than 5 people ever. Yeah. Right? Raise your hand if you've pepper sprayed more than 5. Very few, maybe 1 or 2. Okay? Raise your hand if you got hands-on more than 5. Everybody raises their hands. Okay, what are we training the most? Not that. No. Why? That's what you do the most. Yeah.
And I see, like, you see so many videos, like I see daily on Instagram or on YouTube, where guys come out and it's like 3 or 4 guys on one dude. Yeah. They're all pulling tasers, and the guy somehow still gets away.
Yeah, because they don't understand what to do. So like, ours, like when you came today, what we were just starting was single man control.
Yeah.
So we'll teach single man control, right? So like, hey, if he's stomach up, a good knee on top position, controlling the near side arm, leg drag position. Sure, you can go chest to chest, but if we go chest to chest, we like to staple the near side arm down so that way he can't grab our weapons, because if our hands are on, like say if we're in a normal side control, this arm is easy for me to reach on your tools.
Yeah.
Right? Where like in jiu-jitsu, you don't got to worry about me reaching other stuff. So you can go chest to chest, but you got to staple near side arm. Now, what does 2, 3, and 4 do when they get there? That's the problem. No one trains what 2, 3, and 4 do.
So that was going to be my question. So like, okay, so if you look at the military, for example, like most of the time I would say you see in the military, a lot of guys, they operate in teams.
Yes.
And they're so used to the team, and when they have to go out on a mission, everybody's going in as a team and they know exactly how to operate. Everybody has a role in their mission. And so like with these types of situations, do you think that there's a lack of team training? Because like maybe
100%.
guys get called, maybe guy gets on a call and he calls for backup, but it's a bunch of dudes that don't work together.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
so do you think that there's like a lack of that, and should there be more of like units that work together in all these different specific scenarios?
So patrol is the biggest function in any police agency. It's the meat and potatoes of what the police department does is patrol. Your SWAT team guys, they're training every day with each other.
Yeah.
Your drug units, they're training every day in these small units. So they're going to work better together. Patrol, it might be, hey, my district borders this district and we're fighting with the same guy, and you come in and we've never trained together.
Yeah.
So if your department trains team tactics at the academy level and the in-service level, everybody's going to know the same job, right? So like when we integrated this into our department, it was a game changer, because even the guys that didn't train jiu-jitsu or wrestling outside of work knew where to go and what to do. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you guys as New Wave has like a system, right?
Yeah.
You guys have a specific system, and that's why it's so good. Because you guys are so dedicated and strict to like what your system and objectives are as far as how you guys grapple.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are, hey, move for move. No, you guys do everything with a purpose.
Yeah.
So now, today they'll do all the one-man control, because one's going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, as 2 comes in, he just takes the responsibility of control off this guy's plate.
Right.
So say I'm fighting with you one-on-one and your stomach down, and I have double underhooks and wrist control.
Yeah.
Okay. He comes in and he pins your legs down, or he figure fours your legs, or he gets a bear hug on your legs. Next guy comes in and he posts on your head.
Yeah.
Why? Because those are the 3 main parts that you need to get up off the ground with.
Yeah.
Right? So if I have 3 guys and we just take away what you need to get up,
Yeah.
then we can work the arms out after.
Yeah.
So the problem is the big shortcoming is we got to get their arms out.
Yeah.
So if you're pulling on an arm and he's pulling an arm, we're pulling.
Yeah.
And we all know that pulling and pushing
Yeah.
is going to go to the bigger, stronger guy, or to whoever's inside.
Yeah.
So we work 1 arm at a time. We pin, one guy works the arm out, and then the next guy can work the arm. But we got to have control before we get custody.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to get custody of the arms. If you put a guy on one of your arms and you're standing or even on the ground and they can't control your hips and your head, they're never getting your arms around your back, ever.
No. Yeah.
Right? Even if you're not trained, you're just strong.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, no, we need to understand, how do we control him? And then what are our disciplines? Where do we go? And so our team tactics block is like a whole module of what we do.
Yeah.
And that's like probably the bread and butter of what we teach is solo and team tactics.
So, yeah, because I mean, I was teaching one day at Sheepdog, and then the other room, they were doing a class with some cops. They had a car in the classroom, and it was basically like, pulling a guy out of the car.
Yeah.
And they were like kind of showing some techniques as to how to like, pull the guy's arm, and you kind of like, arm bar him basically on the side, and the other guy comes in. But I was drilling it, and like they had me go in the car one time, and they were like, try to get him out of the car. And then it was like, me go and try to pull this guy out of the car. And they showed me a couple things, and I just kind of like jumped in at the last second. But I was like, dude, if this guy doesn't want to get out of the car, good fucking luck taking him out of the car.
Tough.
It is fucking hard, especially solo. And if you're just trying to like pull his hands off the steering wheel or whatever the case is.
And solo is super dangerous too, because like now you're getting stuck in there. You can't watch both hands at the same time.
Yeah.
People can present from the person and from the compartments. Or
or they grab you, or you're fucking tooled
so
out.
we do vehicle extraction with a minimum of 2.
Yeah.
And basically we split the door like if we're doing building clearing, so that like if I'm on the B pillar, so like this is your driver's seat, I'm the one talking to you, I can come across into the A-frame, and my sole job is just to make sure you don't reach with that hand.
Yeah.
The near side guy has to win this arm, and basically like we do 2-on-1s in wrestling.
Yeah.
You want to win that on the B pillar. The problem is people don't take the slack out when they pull the arm. So then you tuck your elbow back in.
Yeah, and then it's really hard to
So
punch.
like, it's easy to get the hand off the steering wheel. The problem on the steering wheel is everyone pulls away. Well, we know breaking grips is the thumb's the weak part, right?
Yeah.
So think of the steering wheel as a clock. So 12, 9, 6. If it's 9 to noon, I break the hand up. Now I'm fighting just a thumb. Same thing down here. If it's 6 to 9, I'm going to break the hand again up.
Yeah.
But I'm peeling up, but it's like a shake. And once I win this, as soon as that clears the hang, I don't start to walk it back. The guy's going to tuck his elbow inside and you're going to be fucked. Right? As soon as I yank it out, I call it pulling the slack. So like say this is your driver's side seat and you're hanging on a steering wheel. When I come up, and the second guy's going to be like into the A pillar. That way if you start to present, he can still get to this arm without you getting the gun out or up. So like if I'm on this side as I go, it's a short shake, but I have to get the palm up so I'm going to shake, pull the slack.
Right, yeah.
Once I pull the shoulder to there, now I just walk it to the B pillar, which is unforgiving.
Yeah.
The only reason that guy's now not coming out is because he's got a seatbelt on.
Yeah, exactly.
That B pillar is so unforgiving, but people don't know how to get the arm there.
Yeah. So I just want to go back. So can you just briefly kind of touch on like your first your kind of your career in the police force, and then when did you start training, and how basically your company EFC Effective Fitness Combatives came out, and like what was the reasoning or the purpose behind like you wanting to start that, and at what point, like was it during your career in the police or was it after, or just a little bit of the background?
Yeah, so I didn't train prior. I had wrestled through like middle school periodically, and I wasn't a big wrestler. I was a soccer guy. I played soccer like full time all year round. It was like my whole life. Played collegiately. Went to college and then got out and decided I wanted to be a cop and go to the police academy. And I hadn't started training yet. So it's 2000 and I'm in the police academy. And MMA is fairly new then, about 7 years in. And mixed martial arts starting to come around now rather than just like jiu-jitsu versus wrestling or boxing. Yeah. But I just remember I was on a call and it was my first year. And I had to arrest a guy for DWI, but he was much bigger than me. And thank God he was super hammered. Yeah. Because like he swung at me and my backup was probably at this point like 4 or 5 minutes away. And I just remember like just being athletic and having good agility like allowed me to move, and I didn't really understand like arm drag and getting to the back, but like I got behind him and he kind of fell down because he was so drunk. And I struggled with him, couldn't get his arms behind his back, back up came when I'm getting his arms behind his back. But I was like, if this guy wasn't drunk and he had a warrant and he wanted to fight me, like he's bigger and stronger than me, I had no idea what to do. Yeah. In the academy then they were teaching like PPCT, which is like, I call it one-ply toilet paper because your finger goes through and gets shit on all the time, So it's like, it's pressure points, which is pain compliance,
Right, yeah.
And adrenaline's a good drug. Everyone we deal with is on alcohol or some sort of controlled substance. So pain compliance fails all the time.
How often tasers fail all the time on days that are...
Tasers fail all the time too, right? And a lot of time tasers fail due to like operator error. And we can talk about that after, but like, the goal of the taser isn't pain compliance. The problem is everyone thinks they can drive stun them. Because it hurts you when you're sober. And like, but if you're committed, like, it's just pain compliance. The probe spread is what you want, and that gives you NMI, that neuromuscular incapacitation. It locks you up and you can't move.
Right. Yeah.
The problem is when you shoot two probes, one, they don't get far enough apart, or two, you only get one good connection. So then that's just pain compliance. Yeah. Right, so like if the belt line, and think of this concept for team tactics, is my belt line. If I can get a probe above and below, I'm now controlling both your upper and lower body with neuromuscular like incapacitation. Where if I have them both up here, you can still move. Yeah. Right, this arm's good. Like as long as you want to fight through the pain, you're cool. And people fight through the pain, right? Yeah. So you got to split the belt line. Now, if they don't split the belt line, or they get one probe that doesn't make a connection, coats, whatever, or the guy's moving and one missed, then the drive stun goes opposite hemisphere, above or below the good connection. Then you get your neuromuscular incapacity. You never see people do that. Yeah. They just don't train it enough. So they rely on the pain compliance, just tasing the guy. And if you're getting tased, what are you going to do? Yeah. Move away from it and keep fighting if you're committed to the fight, right? So pain compliance just fails all the time. So I realized like, hey, these pressure points aren't working. We're doing like these iron wrist takedowns, and I'm like, this just isn't working. So I was like, I gotta start training jiu-jitsu. I watched UFC 1. I was a huge UFC fan. I was like, I got to start training. So I just started training in jiu-jitsu, which was more difficult where I lived in Western New York, Buffalo area, because there was no black belts in there at the time.
Right.
So it was like constantly traveling to seminars and then coming back and getting like good wrestlers and being like, hey, let's train. And that's how the first few years went, was just like kind of basically like going to seminars and then come back and working out the stuff ourselves.
Yeah.
It wasn't until like 2004 or 5, I was like, man, police training is pretty bad.
Yeah.
I went to defensive tactics school actually after I started training, like 4 years after I started training. And again, it was all like, martial arts that have good things in them for other reasons. Okay, discipline, whatever, but like Aikido and like iron wrist take, like, we don't see that stuff work in MMA, and I refer to MMA a lot because like the goal in police work is, hey, let's get up off the ground and be on top. We don't want to be on bottom. Like there's guard's not neutral in a street fight.
No.
Right? Now, could Giancarlo, ADCC champion, pull guard on someone that has no idea what they're doing and sweep them at will and be on top? Yeah. Sure. But most cops don't have that training level yet, right? So it's like...
But the practical use of that is not ideal.
It's not ideal. So I refer to it more as like, hey, let's get that MMA mindset of we want to be on top. And if we're on the ground, we have 2 goals. And that is to stand up or get on top. Yeah. Right? So understanding like underhooks, framing, shrimping, getting our feet in the hips, wedging out, standing up, sweep, however we can. But, we put gear on and getting to our hips isn't as easy, and it's hard to sweep. So realistically, getting our feet in the hips and wedging out and down blocking and wrestling is sometimes easier. But so I saw this big gap, started training more and more, and then went to defensive tactics school. When I came back, I was fairly lucky. The chief at the time, Harry Snellings, was a former SWAT commander, big time was a big wrestling all his life, and then was a wrestling coach. Mm-hmm. And he pulled me in, and he said, hey, I want to revamp our training, specifically the hands-on on portion. We can be better. I don't care what the state's doing. Yeah. They only govern what we do in the academy. Yeah. But our in-service, we can do what we want for. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I want you to come up with it. And I was like, okay. So, I originally did, and it was way better than what people were learning at the time, but I was a little bit too sport jiu-jitsu oriented in the beginning. Yeah. I worked a lot of like, hey, let's start from guard and mount escapes, and realistically never did a whole lot of top stuff. Yeah. Just did about all the like worst position things. Right, yeah. Which you need to do. But like getting cops that have never been put on their back on the job to like want to train getting up off the back, they're like, oh, this has never happened to me. It's not a problem that I have to think or so. I was like, how do I trick them into training more? And that was, what do we do every day? We fight with guys on top and we have trouble taking them into custody. Yeah. So just started understanding like, how do we control a guy on top? Where are our shortcomings? And then where does size and strength makes a difference? Because most cops aren't going to train. Bad guys don't train, so they both suck, right? Their level of training is not good. So size and strength is going to make a difference now. Yeah. And where do we put them in the safest spot to, one, be able to stay engaged when needed, but to be able to lead the fight when they also need to. Yeah. And so I just started working the system throughout from like 2009-ish to about 2012 before I finally was in a spot where I was like, hey, here's our solo and team tactics. Mm-hmm. And now this is really the bread and butter of the system. Yeah. And then that's just constantly been evolving now since then. So another 12, 14 years, right? Yeah. So it's like, that's kind of how it happened. Yeah. And then 2015, the state was like, man, what is the department doing in Western New York that everyone's raving about when this guy's going to conferences and training and local gyms and training? And the police department has, the police department I worked for was a very busy, small urban department, and you were hands-on. They're doing use of forces every day. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why are they having use of forces all the time and never making these YouTube highlight reels of like bad tactics? It's because everybody knew how to run the system. They might not train grappling or jiu-jitsu every day or every week, but you're training, somewhere between 4 to 8 times a year in the same system of like, they at least know where to go and what to do. Mm-hmm. They know the mechanics of those basic positions. Yeah. That's the team tactics, right? Like we were talking about it. Like you have 3-4 guys. you could try to hold down a guy. We see him all the time on social media. The guy gets up and then runs away or gets on top, and it's all because they have no plan and they have no training and no communication. So that's what fails is they don't know what to do. They've never done it together, and then they don't communicate it.
Yeah.
So our goal was, hey, let's come up with a plan. And we basically built it into like an SOP, a standard operating procedure, which like everybody knew in our department, no matter what shift or division you worked on, hey, if I'm high in contact, you're low.
Yeah.
Third guy comes in, he goes opposite of 2.
Yeah.
So the contact guy's controlling like the torso, hips area. 2 is going to go control the legs or the head. 3 is going opposite. And then 4 comes in and is kind of watching our backs, and like if we need to help move an arm out or cuff, whatever, he can do that.
Yeah.
But it was like those guys did that over and over again until the point where like they were doing it now in training 4 to 8 times a year, and then they're also doing it on the streets on a weekly, monthly basis, to the point where like the whole department was on the same page. And then the state found out, and they were like, oh, so they contracted me out, and I built a team of instructors that did jiu-jitsu or wrestling from all around the state academies. Yeah. And now all New York State, except for NYPD, runs that program.
So, and this was pre the company. This was while you were still.
Yeah, that was pre-company.
Yeah, and you were still working as a cop.
Yep, still working as a cop. So EFC derived. In the meantime, I was working with some guys out of Vegas, teaching DT for like C4C, and doing the state thing and kind of my own thing at the conferences and the tactical conferences. And then it was getting time to get close to retirement, and I was like, I saw what we did at our department and what we've done towards the state and how it's been such an improvement. Like, how do I take this like across the country? Yeah. And that was just private sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I partnered with a guy out of South Carolina that has a large police platforms on Instagram and marketing, and he's got a police background as well. And we talked for a good year before it came to the idea of like, hey, let's do this. And so in March of 2022, we're like, all right. And then we launched the company in March 22 and basically took that curriculum and system and made it into one that we can take on the road. Yeah. And so now that's what we do.
So one of the things that we talked about this a little bit before, because, I don't, like you mentioned, like every martial art kind of has their own like thing that can be applicable, but objectively, if you look at jiu-jitsu as a martial art, I would say like a combination of like jiu-jitsu, wrestling, and Muay Thai kind of have, if you put it into like practical terms, the most crossover across, not just in a sport context, but in a real life fighting context, a self-defense context, an MMA context, and a tactical like element in terms of like subduing people and stuff like that. But just from the ability of like being able to like subdue somebody, especially somebody who has no training, with like minimal actual damage, like needing to do damage, which is ultimately like from a police perspective the goal, because now you're dealing with like the legal side of things. Like
use of force is our rules of the game, right? We can only use force to certain levels depending on their actions,
which is another thing I want to get into, because I think, and I know it varies a little bit from, and you know more than me, I know it varies depending on where you are in the country and things like that, but it almost puts a handicap on cops depending on what they're allowed and not allowed to do.
Sure.
Because you got a situation where maybe you're one-on-one or not, maybe you're multiple on one, but you have a guy who is fighting for his life or fighting to not be put in jail for whatever reason, and at this point they don't care about your livelihood, and you're kind of, you could even get in trouble or put in jail or lose your job for trying to protect yourself and ultimately, the people, right? The civilian population. So I'm sure there's, frustration and there's some kind of downside to that, but ultimately, if you had to pick one tool that could be kind of give you the best of both worlds, I would say jiu-jitsu has the most crossover across all the contexts, right? And so how much of that is there in training when you're in the police academy, and why do you think that it's not, like there's no combat standard and no physical standard that needs to be upheld after you leave the police academy?
So law enforcement has always been like the wheels of justice move slowly, and they're always behind in certain aspects. But like When I first started, all the cars had shotguns in them.
Yeah.
Now they all have ARs with optics. Okay. So they went from shotguns to eventually the AR platform with iron sights to now optics. So to say that they don't want to be progressive in certain ways, with technology they're progressive, with weapons they're progressive, it's the training and the fitness standards are not progressive in.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes down to one, ego, and just misrepresentation of people are going to get hurt in training.
Yeah.
Okay. So fitness standards. Almost every single agency and academy in this country has a fitness standard to get into the academy and has a fitness standard to get out of the academy. But then the profession has a huge shortcoming in, now I don't have to ever take a PT test again. So for the next 22 years, I can go from the 180-pound 20-year-old to a 40-pound out of shape guy that can barely get out of the car or can't run, 100 feet.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, why do we have a standard for the 20-year-old but not for the 40-year-old?
Yeah.
If you're a professional, and that's what police are, is we are professionals, and we need to be at a standard to save an innocent civilian's life,
Yeah.
to save our partner's lives, maybe even save the suspect's life,
Yeah.
right, depending on the
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the fitness is a foundation of everything. If you don't have that foundation of fitness, you are not a professional in what law enforcement does. And, I say this and like people will be like, but like, that's the truth. That's the hard truth of the number one thing that is wrong with policing is the fitness standards.
Yeah.
It should be mandatory every year to pass fitness. Well, I'm 38 years old and I work a desk. Okay, you're a detective and you work a desk.
Yeah.
But do you wear a gun and badge? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you go out in public? Yes. Do you go knock on doors? Yeah, probably with less backup than patrol does. Do you go out to lunch in public with your gun and badge on? Yes. So if you aren't fit, you're a liability.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? To yourself, your partners, innocent civilians, whoever you're trying to save. And that's the thing with standards too. So say like New York State uses what the Cooper standards. And the Cooper standards are flawed. And that's kind of being brought up, and they're looking to actually change it. Because DCGS in New York, which is like the governing standards, is doing a good job of revamping what's got to be taught in the basic academy. They contracted me out to revamp the DT one, and I put together a good team, and we did it as a team. Mm-hmm. They're now doing that for the range guys. So instead of static old range shooting habits, flat range fails, they got these guys moving around, reloading in their workspace, because a gunfight is going to be fast, 360,
right.
And if you can't move in a 360 environment, how do you do that safely if you've never trained it, and now you got to do it under stress?
Yeah, exactly.
So they're doing a good job of that, and the next one they're working on is now PT, and they're looking at making something that's more age and gender neutral, kind of like the Army came out with. So the Army came out with a new physical standards test, and it's age and gender neutral. And the reason being is, like in New York State, if you want to be a certified SWAT team under DCGS standards, you have to pass the Coopers to get into SWAT school. Okay, to be a certified SWAT operator, you got to pass this test to even get in. That's at 70th percentile. But if I'm a 22-year-old male, I have to pass it at the fastest time. What if I'm a 40-year-old female trying to get into SWAT operator school? I get 7 more minutes to pass the 1.5-mile run than this guy does, but we're going to the same school to do the same job.
Yeah.
Like, it's got to be the same.
It's got to be.
It should be gender, age neutral, one standard, but it should be a standard.
Yeah, 100%.
And it should be more job specific, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, run a 1.5 miles. That tests some things, but I can't tell you the last time someone ran a 1.5 miles as a police officer.
Yeah.
Like, very rarely do you run more than 300-400 yards in a foot pursuit.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have to run 10 flights of stairs in an active shooter. Or you got to run 50 yards across a parking lot and into a school. And then, so where's the sprinting and the agility? And that kind of workout is like what we need, more job specific stuff.
It's got to be contextual.
Contextual to what we do. So that is a big downfall of the profession that needs to happen.
Yeah.
The next biggest downfall is going to be control tactics.
Yeah.
The bread and butter of what we do when we use force at any level, okay, passive, actively resisting, and I break it down into 4 categories. Passive is the guy that's not even, he's just like not going, you can kind of just direct him to go. We don't worry much about that guy.
Yeah.
But if you don't know how to control your own body, how are you going to control somebody else's body? And we might take someone down we don't need to take down, or like. Then the next one, which is probably the highest percentage of the persons we deal with on the street, is actively resisting. I'm trying to arrest this guy, and he doesn't want to be arrested. But he's not trying to assault me.
Yeah.
He's just trying to, like, tuck his arms underneath, flail away, run, just not get taken into custody. That's the highest level of people we deal with. Then the guy that's actively combative. He's actively trying to punch, kick, hit me, avoid arrest, but also assault me. And then some sort of deadly physical force, which he's going for a weapon, my weapon. He wants to kill me, whatever the case may be. So those are like your 4 major ones. But in any of those, what we use, the large, overwhelming majority of time in police work is hands-on. There's statistics out there too, like police contacts. If you take every police contact versus how many of those contacts actually are use of force, it's like 0.002% of our actual uses of force.
Yeah.
So the amount of times police use force in the overall contact spectrum is very, very minimal.
Yeah.
Just because of social media and the news, we see all the uses of force, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what people want to see. And
Right.
So control tactics is by far and away what you do all the time and what we need to be good at, and it's the least trained.
Yeah.
Everybody has to qualify at least once a year on their gun.
Yeah.
And just because you have to qualify once a year and you shoot 70, which is a C in education, you still suck at whatever you're doing. Like a C is not good.
And is it like when they qualify, like what kind of testing are they doing for that?
Yeah,
Is it
and
like
that's the
just
other
kind of
thing. So
shooting at
just
a...
depending on the department, the state, like shooting on a piece of paper that's not moving and they're not moving, like there's no
it's not
stress.
dynamic. Yeah.
It's not dynamic, right? So that's getting better though. There's a lot of good range companies in states that are changing their range programs to building the fundamentals, which you got to do first.
Yeah.
Can't have a guy moving and shooting if he doesn't have the fundamentals.
Sure.
But once they have the fundamentals, we need to get them moving.
Yeah.
Right? Working cover, reloading on the move, those type of things. Because in the real world, it's a 360 dynamic, not just a flat range and we're shooting on stagnant paper. We're getting better at that, okay? But again, now we talk about control tactics. We don't train it, and the big reason we don't train it is 2 things. Ego, it's not because of money. Departments get money, and they put it into training that's, one, probably useless, or we don't need, or we can find a better way to do it, like sexual harassment training. You need it, but are there ways where we can say, hey, take this format online, and it's a course you got to take, and you have to go through it and pass a test? Can you do that for sexual harassment? Yep. Can you do that for maybe some domestic violence training? Sure. What you can't do online is hands-on training.
You can't replace, like we were talking about before, like, you know, with shooting too. Like, you got to stress test people. You got to put them in dynamic situations. Yep. And like I see in a lot of like the footage, you see, all the YouTube videos you see of like cops kind of fumbling and getting fucked up in these exchanges. Maybe they even learn some like basic combatives in the academy, but if they're not actively training it, and like doing grappling just gives you that like live, like if you're doing grappling even twice a week in an academy with just regular people, like you're doing live combat in the safest context that you possibly can on a regular basis. So when you get into that engagement, it's just natural for you. Like you're used to that engagement. And so it's like, it's invaluable, even if it did cost more money, it's invaluable. It's
more than just the understanding the skills and the control, right? Yeah. It's the mindset. Like you're not panicking.
Yeah.
Someone's trying to fight me, you're not panicking. Okay, I've been here 100,000 times or however many times it is. You've been uncomfortable before. Have been put in a bad position before. I know how to get out of this. Yeah. So if we panic or we handle things with panic or anger, it's never a good outcome.
Yeah.
In our personal lives, everyone has had an argument with a loved one when they were angry and they probably said something they didn't want to say. And that's because they were angry.
Yeah.
Right? Like as a professional, we can't get angry. We can't take it personal.
Yeah.
He's not attacking Jay because he's Jay's. Attacking Jay because he's a cop at the time, realistically, right? And I'm trying to take his freedom. Like that's kind of a big deal to some people.
For sure, yeah.
Right now, he's probably getting arrested for whatever reason is his fault, but like I'm taking his freedom. So we can't take it as anger, but then the biggest thing is panic and stress. If I'm panicking, like let's just look at it in jiu-jitsu aspect. If you're grappling a guy and he starts to panic, you're like, it's over.
Yeah, it's over.
It's done. You're going to catch him. He's going to submit him. So now when it counts for like, hey, it's not a tap or the ref's not stopping the fight. Hey, if I panic and I lose, it may be he went to my gun or he got his own gun or a knife. It could be a life or death situation, right? So it's like we can't panic. Panic is not an option. I think your Muay Thai, your wrestling, and your Jiu-Jitsu are important because, one, in those sports, we're sparring on a daily basis in the gym.
Yeah.
You're getting used to that push-pull. You're getting used to getting hit. You're getting used to being in where you don't panic anymore.
Yeah.
You handle things because you're used to being uncomfortable. And I don't know if I made this line up, if someone said this line, I don't know, but I always say, like, if they can't make you uncomfortable, they're not going to be able to beat you.
Yeah.
If you get uncomfortable, then they're probably going to be able to beat you.
Yeah.
So training every day in jiu-jitsu, wrestling, or Muay Thai, right? And those are the three arts that we kind of take and steal from for combatives.
Yeah.
And it's because we need some sort of striking to use striking to disengage, use striking to engage you, maybe use striking to get a behavior change, possibly, right? Yeah. But then wrestling and grappling, why?
Yeah.
Our professional goal in any confrontation use force is control then custody. So I need to control the human being.
Yeah.
And those two sports, okay, have been around for a long time, and they are the premier sports of how do you control another human being. And in those sports, whether it's training or competition, when you're sparring, you're doing that to another skilled person that is trying to not be controlled, right? So now imagine fighting someone that doesn't know how to fight. It's not a fight anymore.
No. Yeah, it's not.
It's just not a fight anymore. Like, it's like, everyone's like, how do you stay so calm, like in your body cam videos? I was like, I've been here 100 times with guys that are skilled.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, this guy's not skilled. He might be bigger and stronger than me, but I know, one, he's going to be exhausted in a minute.
Yeah.
I have dominant position on him. I know what his behaviors are going to be. I know where I can't let him go. And it's just a matter of time before I have him into control so I can get him into custody. And I think that's so important, why the art of grappling is so important for police to be training regularly. You hit on it before. It's got to be consistent training. It can't be, hey, I'm going to do this in the academy for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the academy, most academies, you do it for like 2 weeks and then you're done.
Yeah.
And then you go to range for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If you train something for 2 weeks and never train it again, you're still not going to be good at it.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we get this built in to do continuously? Now, I know some academies are, like Syracuse Police Department in New York has a deal with a jiu-jitsu gym. And like 2 or 3 days a week during the academy, every week in the academy, they go there, instead of doing their PT, they do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And they train jiu-jitsu, right? And it was great because he's a civilian. But there's benefits to being around civilians.
Yeah.
You know, he comes in, and he's training them. We're partnering with the community. We want community police relations to be better anyways. What better way to start doing it? You know, I tell people, go to your jiu-jitsu gyms and train. When you're in the gym, you have all walks of life in that gym. You have super rich people. You have super poor people. You have all cultures in that gym. Nobody's talking about politics, and no one is talking about money and poor. What are we doing?
Yeah.
We're training. We're getting better. We're having fun. It's a stress relief for people.
Yeah.
It's good for your mental health. And you start to meet people in different walks of life, and you know how to like communicate with these people.
Yeah.
In the police world, sometimes like we live the job, and our friends are all in the cop world, and we don't understand life outside of that.
Yeah.
And I just never really just understood that because I was always training and being around people, and I had friends that were outside of the cop world and friends in all walks of life. So it was like, hey, I think jiu-jitsu helps promote that too. That's just another benefit of jiu-jitsu that people don't think about. Like,
and it's a huge part of like being like, when you're a police officer, your day-to-day interactions are with people that are not cops. So you need to know how to talk to people and how to read people, and I think that's definitely a huge benefit on top of obviously the training that it builds, and then also, you know, the mental, like I know a lot of cops that just purely for the psychological benefits, like it's huge because it gets them into work, that like whatever stresses they deal with, and it's a stressful job, like.
Of course, it's super stressful. You're going to work every day, and you never know that day's picking you.
Who you're pulling over, like what's going to happen. So like I think there's a lot there's a lot more benefits outside of the training, but obviously that's the primary one. And I never thought about it as the way that you mentioned it, which is the thing that is done the most, which is the hands-on training, which I never thought about that, is the thing that's trained the least.
It's trained the least.
And so far as like as you go all over the country like doing these courses. So first of all, are you like contracted by departments individually, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have multiple different contracts with different types of agencies. So one government agency is like local police municipalities, sometimes at the state level. Sometimes we'll do like military police through the military. Sometimes it's a private security contracting one. And usually they open them up. The majority of our courses are what we call open, and it's open to like security, military, policing.
Yeah.
So they send a certain number, and then we open it up to other people in the area for registration. Sometimes they buy, hey, we just want this closed course to us, and then obviously they have to meet a certain number for that, but then it's just their closed course.
Yeah.
We do have some hosts that allow us to have civilians in, and we kind of vet them like, hey, why do you want to learn this?
Yeah.
And the majority of that is now jiu-jitsu coaches that are, because it's getting better, but most departments don't have the resources in-house to train their guys hands-on at a high level. Mm-hmm. So the best model right now, or one of the models that's working, is they're partnering with some community gyms that are approved, and then they have some sort of deal with the municipality of like, hey, we're going to pay the gym so much and all our members can train there, or we'll pay for anyone that wants to train here as jiu-jitsu memberships, reimbursed as long as they're signing in.
Yeah.
So partnering with those community members. Now, that's the fastest way to learn the skills, is just go to the sport and be part of it.
Yeah.
Is there an integration from sport into the combatives? Of course there's an integration. We've talked about that. Use of force, difference in positioning of control with weapons and that kind of stuff. So we get a lot of those jiu-jitsu trainers or gyms that'll be like, hey, we want to come to your course because we want to kind of see those differences. So when we're teaching maybe the specific like combatives class once or twice a week, we can teach the specific differences. Yeah. And we want those guys because those guys are now going back and putting out the solution to agencies that don't have the ability to do that, right? So I think it's important partnering with the community. And again, what's it come back to? Everyone's like, oh, our police community relations got to be better. Yeah. Well, now we're supporting the local gyms, right? They're giving us training. We're building relationships with the community that's going there. So the benefits of it is huge, right? Yeah. Like it's more than just, hey, they're going for training, but hands-on training is overwhelmingly what we do. I'll just reference some NYPD statistics and I'll round them off. Yeah. 2023, quarter one and quarter two. Now, obviously NYPD is the largest agency in the country by far. They have like 33,000 officers. The next biggest one is like 11,000. Wow. So they're like 3 times the next biggest. Like they're the size of their officers population is like the size of a lot of small cities. Yeah. So that's a huge dynamic for them. But anyways, quarter one in 2023, their use of force stats were like handgun was used, I think it was 8 times. So they had 8 times where their use of force was a handgun.
That's per officer?
No, that was the whole department for the first quarter. Taser was around 300 usages. And then baton was very low. OC was very low. And then hands-on was like 1,700.
So like 3 months, 33,000 cops, it's 8 handguns, 300 tasers roughly, and
like 1,700 hands-on.
That's actually less than I would have imagined.
Yeah. So which is less, right? Yeah. Because you see, like, out of all your contacts that police have contact with civilians, we're not always dealing with the people we have to fight with. Yeah. The majority of problems we solve are verbally or like, you just don't see that because it's not exciting and so they don't understand. You go to quarter two, everything bumped up a little bit. Yeah. Weather gets nicer in New York, so more people are active and want to be outside. And so then like, I think it was handgun was 10, that was up like 2. Tasers were up like about 100 to 400. Baton and OC stayed about the same. And then hands-on was like 2,100. Yeah. So it's like, again, you're talking firearms, which they have to train minimum once a year. And some departments will do 2, 3, proactive ones probably get 4 trainings in. To no DT. Mm-hmm. No hands-on DT for patrol, right? But you're using that 2,100 times. Yeah. That's by far and away, overwhelmingly what you're doing is force. and that's what we train the lit on. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, ego. Guys don't want to train hands-on because they don't want to realize how bad they are.
Yeah.
And then 2, it's too dangerous because people are going to get injured in training, and then who's going to work for we got to pay for their comp, all this kind of stuff. The Marietta Police Department did a fairly decent study on like kind of debunking that thought of like, hey, the guys that trained used less force on the street and injured them and suspects less to where like that money offset itself.
Right. Yeah.
Now, are you going to have an injury here or there in training? Of course. Okay. That's just it. Can you minimize it by understanding how to drill safely, getting people's body conditioned to drill?
Yeah.
Most of the time the injuries come because the guys don't know how to fall. They don't know the push-pull. Their body's not conditioned to grappling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
They're
so
just not
training
physically
continuously will change that anyways in the long run. But just having it done safely, maybe doing, hey, we're going to do some sparring, but it's going to be objective sparring. So like positional.
Yeah.
But if you're the suspect, you're not going sparring 100%.
Yeah.
You're going to just go enough to show me struggle on 1 or 2 routes and make me work through the panic and, this isn't working, where do I go next?
Giving me a look of...
Giving me some struggle, right? Yeah. So there's ways to work that in and then up it as you evolve. And we've just seen that no one wants to do it.
Yeah.
Very little. There are departments now that are doing it, and when they do it, the change is astronomically good.
Yeah.
And it's safer, one, for the cops. It's safer for the civilians we're arresting.
Yeah.
It's clearly more safe for backup and for the civilians we're protecting. It just doesn't make sense why we don't do it. Again, it's ego and just misinformation. And I'm not saying admin are uneducated and politicians are uneducated. They're uneducated in the aspect of what training is.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to be like, hey, we're going to do 4 hours of use of force training. We're going to go through case law, which is super important. We have to do that too. But, okay, we sat behind a desk for 4 hours, did it, beat the desk, and we're going to be good at it. Now I go fight and I still suck at fighting.
Yeah. So how do you, like, other than, because I know some police departments, like, we're APD, I have we have a handful of cop students in my classes and all throughout, the classes at the gym, and even some instructors that are cops. And like APD for a while, I don't know if they're still doing it, but a bunch of my students that were cops, like every single day that they would come into class, they would take a picture to, say that they were in class because they were getting overtime pay for doing. So they were getting incentivized to come to class, and so they were coming like 3, 4, 5 days a week, reporting it back to their department. They were getting incentivized with a little bit extra pay. Now, I don't know. I think they needed a certain amount of people to that be participant for them to be able to keep doing this. I don't know if it's still a thing. Most of the students were just training anyways, right? But it was cool that they were incentivizing it.
For sure. They're putting in time on their own time outside of work to better themselves in the profession. Like them paying for their jiu-jitsu memberships, like they should. They should
be. Yeah, I think they should be paid. But like, so how do you, outside of like incentivizing, because even that, like if they don't have enough people, they'll take that away. Like you got to make it mandatory. Like to me, it should be like, even if it's
has to be changed.
2 hours a week, that is literally part of your hourly wage. That is part of your job. That's part of your training. So like, how do you, like, is it something that, needs to be changed up at the top? Do people need to hire people in the private sector like yourself or other companies that do the same thing? Like, to me, it's like something as simple as literally just hiring a local coach. It could be anybody.
Yes.
A freaking local purple belt that just knows basic jiu-jitsu and just saying 1 day a week, he teaches at the police department, however many cops.
Yeah. And I think more people are starting to see that, but when I see more, like we're seeing progression. Like you saw today, you were at the gym,
I was impressed. Yeah.
Lunch rolls, they're free to leave.
Yeah.
To go eat lunch, take a break. We have probably close to 50 people.
Yeah, I would say there's at least 50.
Right?
Yeah.
Close to 50 cops on the mat training. Now, we're all of those from the class, the overwhelming majority, yes. But of course, we had some visitors come in, like Jason from Henzo Austin. He lives here. He comes in to train with us because we have a good relationship. Yeah. Lana came in from Austin PD. She's a black belt. So we have people come in because they now know, hey, EFC's in town, lunch rolls, and it's just a good way to build some relationships and friendships. Yeah. But building it into the department, that's it. Like, it's growing.
Yeah.
2018-19, our lunch rolls were 5-6 people at best. Mm-hmm. To now what you see is on the mat. So we are, not just me, but in EFC and other companies, like Invictus has movements and C4C and all these other ones. Like everyone's kind of making this change, but it's super minimal.
Yeah.
Where the change has to be is at the post level, so like the governing standards of the state, or at the DOJ level, saying, hey, we need to make training mandatory weekly, bi-weekly, whatever that case may be, to be continuous training. And put it on the departments to have to do that for their post hours or whatever. Now, could legislation make posts do that? Sure. And it starts to come there. And it doesn't have to say like, hey, post doesn't have to say, hey, you have to use EFC for this.
Yeah.
It could, hey, we just need to train hands-on training and some sort of grappling type content once a week for our officers, twice a week. Logistically, how do you do that? Like, well, I can barely keep cops on the street, this and that. Yeah. That's the other thing, right? There's ways to do it.
Yeah.
Right? You have other things that you do. There's ways to get it done.
Yeah.
Whether you build it into their work schedule, they get paid an hour overtime to do it. Okay, then where do we pay for the overtime? You're getting funding from places to work, say, verbal de-escalation, like 10 grand a week to do verbal de-escalation. That's good too. We need verbal de-escalation, but when verbal de-escalation fails, where do you go now? That's where the big trouble starts to happen, is when verbal de-escalation fails, right? Can team tactics, hands-on tactics, be a form of de-escalation? Yes. The biggest thing is you hear the word de-escalation. That's like the police reform word. We got to de-escalate.
Yeah.
If you and I, and it's either you or me, decides we're not going to verbally de-escalate, now what?
Yeah.
Now it gets to a point where we have to have some other alternatives.
Yeah.
And if we don't have the hands-on skills, that becomes taser compliant and where this fails. Now that's escalating to the point where it can get to deadly physical force. And if we had that intermediate, low hands-on force options, would solve a lot of things, right? Yeah. There's a really good video that came out from Port Charlotte, Florida. That's actually the county north of where I live. So all the guys locally were sending it to me. What do you think of this?
My grandparents used to live there, so I know it pretty
awesome.
well.
Yeah. So, and it's like, all right, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to break down in this video.
Yeah.
There's some good things, okay? And then there's some things that are pretty poor. So let's just work on the things like they didn't rush. Mm-hmm. They de-escalated verbally, and they tried to de-escalate with less lethal, like tasers and even beanbag guns. So they didn't like force the issue. They tried to de-escalate it, but this was a larger guy, probably 6'3", 4", probably close to 250 to 300 pounds. Big guy, clearly didn't know how to fight. And they had to go hands-on because he actually called the police. But throughout the investigation, they found out he's got a misdemeanor warrant, and now they got to take him into custody, and they give him lots of time. So one, the use of force is on him. If he was compliant, there would no be use of force, right? So not just police reform isn't just the police getting better, it's society getting better. Like, hey, if you're going to get arrested, like, okay, comply and then fight it in court.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you start to fight, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
So now let's go back to police getting better. So those are things they did well. Things they did poor is they had no hands-on options. Big guys, certainly, but they had 3 officers when they initially started to go hands-on there. 3 people should control the overwhelming majority of people in the U.S. As long as you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
That's where solo and team tactics come into play, and that's hands-on training. That's having a plan, understanding the concept and tactics you're trying to deploy, and then the communication verbally between us. That's kind of how we say create an SOP out of it, right? Train it, know where you want to go, have that plan, work the concept and tactic, communication, and builds like an SOP. So we would say one guy comes in and goes contact. That's a contact guy. 2 now is going to go to what we call an anchor position. He's going to anchor the legs or the head, okay? Because you and I know in grappling, if we can anchor your legs down, we anchor your head down and your hips down, it's very hard to get up.
Yeah.
And now we're not doing that one-on-one. We're doing that 3 versus 1. We're kind of cheating. So in that, they taser fails multiple times, whether it's the operator's air or the pain compliance, whatever the case may be, taser fails. ASP then fails. If the taser pain compliance fail, why they even go to the ASP anymore? Realistically, ASP is being phased out of police work, and it should probably just be in your car in case you need to break a window or something with it. Like it's pretty useless in police work right now.
Okay.
The amount of people that use ASP is so little. Like, why are you taking this room up and wasting training on it? Right? Replace that 3 hours of ASP training of putting a guy in a red man suit and hitting him and telling him to get back, which looks terrible anyways, to like, let's do some hands-on training.
Yeah.
So that all fails. At one point, the taser takes the guy down, but he like gets one of the probes disconnected, and as he goes to get back up, they push him down, and now he's actually stomach up, which if he's stomach up is the hardest position to get up. So like if one would have went like to a knee on top or a chest-to-chest position, second guy would have went to the legs, third guy would have went to the head, that guy's not getting up.
Yeah.
Right now he's going to get exhausted because he doesn't train. He's going to be super tired. He's a big dude.
He's panicking.
He's panicking.
Yeah.
And they probably control the situation and end up getting him to custody without it escalating to a deadly physical force encounter, which happens.
Yeah.
So now one guy only goes in. The other guys are too busy having less lethals in their hand, and the guy ends up getting up. Now once he's up, a fourth guy comes in with another less lethal beanbag rounds, which, okay, hey, they're using all their less lethal options besides having good hands-on skills.
Yeah.
They put somewhere between 2 and 4 beanbag rounds on him, which only upset the guy more. And now he's committed, and he runs at the cop that has his gun out and ends up grabbing the cop's gun and ends up getting into shooting, and they end up having to engage in deadly physical force because now that escalated to a deadly physical force encounter, right? His actions, he runs at him. Even though he's unarmed, he starts to grab the cop's gun, and now it moves it to a deadly physical force encounter, and he ends up getting shot and doesn't make it. Rewind, imagine if we had a good SOP and good training and 3 guys that don't have to be black belts in jiu-jitsu, they just have to be competent in their control skills. Mm-hmm. That situation is probably de-escalated at that level of control. Right, so we can save lives that way. And if you watch the whole video, and I'm not going to get into it, but if you watch the whole video, the guy that shot him, like, doesn't have a great response to having to shoot the guy.
Yeah.
Right, so you watch that and you're like, that guy didn't want to shoot the guy. He had to shoot the guy at that point. And like, he has. If you watch the video, you'll see what I'm talking about. But like, so that's not good for anybody involved.
Yeah.
Right, we got to shoot somebody. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the cops. They got to live with that, taking a life. Like nobody. I don't know one cop I go to work with ever in my whole career or that I've taught to go to work and be like, I want to shoot someone today.
Yeah, no.
Nobody says that.
No.
Right? Like, understanding we're in a glass house, we don't react well to stress because we don't train it. We're put in positions where we panic. And those things happen now, right? And usually it's the suspects, the highest overwhelming majority is the suspects' actions created that deadly physical force encounter.
Yeah.
Right? Could we be cops and be more progressive and force a de-escalation with good control tactics? Of course we could.
Yeah.
And I've seen it done multiple times. Okay, guys I've trained, so the retainment's there. Girls that worked in the department I did that didn't train jiu-jitsu regularly at all. They never trained jiu-jitsu. They just understood the system and trained regularly in the control tactics. And they sent me a video I watched, and I don't have it released yet because when I do, I want to put it out because the girls get like a bad rap in police work because a lot of times you see, oh, women are worthless in police.
Yeah.
I know males that are worthless in police work.
Yeah.
Right? I know girls that can take males down.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's like, sure, could their attributes be outnumbered the majority of the time? Of course they are. But what if they train?
On an untrained person, that separates.
That's that separation, right? So these 2 girls don't train jiu-jitsu. They have use of force where the guy was running from them. They get a takedown. They go high. The other one goes and figure fours the legs, anchors the legs down. She works an arm extraction before the first male guy even gets there.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I'm like, I can't wait to be able to post the video. I just haven't got clearance to post it, and I don't want them to get jammed up yet, so I can't post it yet, right? But like, that is a great video of like, hey, it can be retained and it can be used with the competent level cop. We just got to give them the training hours.
Yeah.
And you see it. Like, I was on a call where we had a suicidal suspect. His mom told us, a non-body cam, you can hear it in the clip replay, and she's like, he wants to bring the hammer at you guys because he wants you to shoot him. So he's got a hammer in his hand. He wants us to shoot the guy. That is a call I personally responded to. And he's sitting, purposely staged himself on the front porch. So he's sitting like this with the hammer because he knows that the taser, we have to get a good platform to shoot him. We want to get in the chest, on the chest, in the front hard. So he's kind of like a ball. Yeah. And now there's spindles to the left, spindles going to the right, and he's got the door behind him. So the only opening we have really to get a taser shot is from the front, and he's taking that away. And we're just waiting at any point in time for him to run at one of us with a cop, and then maybe hopefully the guy with the taser gets it up and running before one of us has to actually engage in lethal force, right? And we're trying to de-escalate him because we know we've dealt with him numerous times. He gets arrested usually for orders of protection or harassment or assault on the family members. But he also has some mental health conditions, whatever. Like, no one wants to have to shoot this dude.
Yeah.
And we're going through it, and we de-escalated probably for 40 some minutes. And we're changing up, trying to like just make a dialogue with him. And finally I had a couple guys in place, and I moved off, and I went and I spoke to the supervisor, and supervisor trains and he understands, is a good friend of mine. And I said, listen, I'm going to put my gun away. Someone else can have lethal force coverage, and then someone else can have less lethal coverage, right? Because if less lethal fails, which it fails all the time, and he's going to try to smoke someone in the face with a hammer, we probably should have a lethal force coverage. And we don't want to have to shoot him, but I said, I think I can get close enough to this guy where I can, like, when he keeps having this hesitation where he looks down, and I'm like, if I make one like lunging step and jump, I can control the hammer arm, and then you guys can come in, and we can still have the two cover guys in case it fails. Yeah. And so we developed this plan, and I worked myself close enough to where, like, okay, I saw it, and when I was comfortable enough in my hands-on skills that like, so I approached, and as I like closed the distance, and he was probably from me to the fireplace away. That's all the closer it would let me get, you know. So like probably 4 or 5 feet, maybe even a couple more yards further than that. I took like 1 or 2 big steps, and I just like kind of went like an airborne, and I knew I had to control the weapon arm. So I went right to that like bicep tie, wrist tie, and then I kind of was just pushing like on his chest. I was trying to get to his chin to move his head to look away from me, so he couldn't turn into me with that hammer arm until I could staple it down. Yeah. And it worked great, right? Like I made that launch, got his head away, controlled the arm, pinned the hammer. The other guy came in hands on, and the other 2 had cover until we got him into custody, right? We didn't have to shoot him, we didn't have to tase him. But again, is someone that's not as competent in their hands-on skills going to be able to maybe solve that issue? No. And then maybe he gets irritated, and now what if he now maybe they had to shoot that guy, right? Right, yeah. So it's like hands-on tactics and skills. I'm telling you, like, people need to train grappling. That is what they need to do. So, and then integrate it into the use of force in the environment.
So what would you say is the biggest like limiting factor today? Like, is it at the lower level, like individual cops that just need to start, or is it like legislative? Is it like outside pressure, like social pressure? Like what needs to, or is it like a combination of everything?
Yeah, it's a tiered combination. So individually, you want to be a professional. Even if your agency is not giving you training, go seek training. Yeah. Right? Go seek training. For your own well-being. You want to go home and see your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like, so seek training. Yeah. Administrations need to make training mandatory. Good training mandatory, right? Yeah. Hands-on training, better range training, reality-based training, all function of training needs to be better. Okay? Legislation needs to understand that. And I think what people think about is like, oh, uneducated people in the fact of being uneducated in the martial art of mixed martial arts think, oh, it's just MMA, you're going to go beat people up. Jiu-jitsu just choking people. No, I can use those skills to not have to choke them every time. It's just to control them, right? Like, so like the people that don't train, they don't understand how you can properly utilize the skills of grappling and move it into the integration of police work, right? So like combatives basically is like its own martial art. We take what we like from MMA, the Muay Thai striking is creating and controlling distance, to wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Take the fundamentals that we need, integrate it into what we do in law enforcement, meeting use of force levels and the environment and weapons. So like that, it's across all levels that people aren't understanding it, and they need to be better. It needs to be publicly known, like, to do it. Like I was telling you, I'll do as many podcasts as I can, and because the more of civilians and admins and legislators that understand like the true police reform is training continuously.
Yeah.
And it's got to be training continuously in good substance. It's got to be good content.
Yeah.
It can't be poor content, right? Let the guys that are specialists in controlling people, your jiu-jitsu and wrestlers, right? Let those guys understand how to teach those tactics.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you want to integrate it into use of force, have the guys that are cops work with those guys.
Yeah.
Or, cops now are starting to train more. We had 9, 10 black belts in the mat that were cops today.
Yeah.
4 or 5 more brown belts.
I have cops in my class daily.
Yeah. And so we're starting to get the resources. And if you don't have the big enough resources, that's when we depend on guys like you teaching classes, right? Cops are coming to you to learn, to get their skill sets better, and then they're taking their experience from the police work, and then they can start integrating it into their departments. Yeah. I think why EFC has blown up in like 2.5 years, why we've blown up and become the fastest growing combatives company in the country, maybe even the world by the end of this year probably, is because we understand the sports side. Yeah. And then we understand how to articulate it and move it into the use of force in the environment side.
Well, and I think also what you've done, which I think is unique, and until we actually had this conversation, is you guys are actually targeting what the actual problem is, which is that hands-on training. Sure. And so, I mean, you have the statistics to back up what you guys are looking to do. So you've specialized in like a unique area that's lacking. Right. And that's the most important element, because it's what is done the most, like just based on the stats that you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, I think that you mentioned worldwide. I mean, I was just in Denmark, and I did a class with the Danish police, and people knew about EFC and they knew about you. So like, you guys are obviously touching people all over the world, which I think is huge. I wanted to ask, because I am curious about this. There's 2 things. So you mentioned that it's not a funding issue why training is so behind, okay, for police academies like worldwide, especially in the States. What parts of the country or even the world do you think have the best training and the best tactics, specifically hands-on, but just all around? And then also, how do you think, if funding isn't an issue, how do you think movements like defund the police have affected police departments in recent years? Because that was huge over the COVID times and in recent times. And how do you think that's, if not from a training standpoint, like in what areas has that negatively impacted law enforcement and like first responders?
Sure. So like the defund the police thing, any area or city municipality that went with the defund the police and took money from the police have now, 3 years later, put in double or triple that to refund the police because it was just a complete failure. Yeah. Now, I'm all for police reform. I'm all for reform of anything, bail reform, whatever. But we can't take it, say this is the white fence in the middle. We can't take it and jump all the way to the far extreme left ideas, and we can't take it and jump all the way to the far extreme right ideas, right?
Well,
we have to make progression in different ways, right? Defunding the police isn't the issue, right? If we live in a glass house, everything we do is out there, right? 1, you should train more that way, considering the glass house. 1, and then 2, just do the right thing. Be a good human as a person. You could be in the deadly physical force level to shoot someone, and if you have to do that, you have to do that. Yeah. But you might have other options too, and you don't necessarily have to try those options per case law, but could you? Yeah. Right? Like, do I have to go and attack that hammer hands on? No, but did I feel like, okay, I'm confident enough that guy's not going to hurt me with a hammer? And
and you probably saved that guy's life.
And probably could have saved that guy's life, because after 40 minutes of de-escalating, it wasn't going anywhere. Yeah.
And had you not had that confidence in your ability to subdue somebody, even with a weapon, even knowing that guy was like, fuck it, I don't care if I die today. Yeah. I mean, that's a big decision, and you can only, like in that moment, especially when you're engaging somebody and like you're in that fight or flight situation, like a guy who is either trying to avoid going to prison for however long, or just doesn't care about dying, doesn't really give a shit. But you now have to think about your own safety, their safety, the legal repercussions of everything. and the safety of, you know, civilians and your team, right? Your police officers around you. So like being able to make all those decisions in a fraction of a second without training is just impossible. Like you can't ask that of anybody.
And look at the cops. Like if you have to shoot someone, all human beings don't take being violent the same.
Yeah.
They might never recover mentally from having to take somebody else's life, right?
Yeah.
So that could be something that is going to cause them issues the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Right? So like that should be our last case scenario. Now, Graham Connor, which is the overwhelming like use of force case law, states that what would a reasonable officer do? If a reasonable officer with the same training, skill, or background would have engaged, then you're probably okay to do that. Do I have to? I don't always have to do anything.
Yeah.
Nothing said, so I have to do this. Like always and never are terrible words in police work.
Yeah.
Even in grappling, saying I always do this or I never do this. Like
No, it's so
there might
case
be
by
times
case.
you might like, okay, everything fails at certain moves. Like
Yeah.
you're the ADCC world champion returning 2 years in a row, right? What's your favorite move?
Yeah, I never, I get asked that question literally every single seminar, and I just cannot have a specific answer because it's
you have
contextual.
to be well-rounded,
Yeah.
right? Like what works for this guy is going to fail against this guy, and
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
to, right? So like my gun isn't 100%.
No,
it
yeah.
might malfunction.
Yeah.
Maybe the guy runs through those bullets and takes 5-6 rounds and still attacks
Yeah,
me.
exactly. Yeah.
Right? So it's like, what are our options? Where do we go?
Yeah.
What do we do? So defund the police was a huge failure. Everybody knows it's a huge failure, even the people that defunded the police. Now, can police reform make us better? Of course it can. Can we allocate funds from where we're spending them and they're not being used well to somewhere else? Is there funding that we can find ways to do it? Yes. I've seen and gone to trainings where people have paid astronomical amounts of money to do this training, and I left that training and was like, this was the worst training I've ever been to.
Yeah.
But this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
So-
like let's find a way to fund it to where we're training cops continuously. The problem is society thinks that cops are trained robots. They think most cops are trained robots.
Yeah.
Most cops I know, most of my friends are trained outside of work, but like the majority of cops I know don't train outside of work. They're the average person. They're a human being that puts a gun and badge on, has a few hours in the academy of building clearing, a few hours of range, a few hours of DT, and now they go to work and they have to be, they have to break up the neighborhood fight. They have to be the counselor to someone having a mental health crisis. They might have to be the gladiator that's breaking up a fight and running into an active shooter, right? So they have to play all these roles, and we don't train them right.
Yeah.
We don't train them right. And it's like, we need to train continuously. Hands-on is the biggest shortcoming. I think we need a lot of that. But that doesn't mean we need to shortchange going to our gun and training that, because when we have to, that's the most dangerous, right? When your kid is stuck in school during an active shooter, you want the cops responding to be the A squad guys on the gun, right?
Yeah,
well, if you're getting most patrol units, you're not getting that.
No, yeah.
Right? You're getting the guys that pass the qual with a C.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, I definitely agree that, I don't think that it affected the training element, because like you said, I don't think funding is the issue, because it's one, it's up to the individual. You got to take responsibility as a person, but also, I mean, it doesn't take that much to just train a little bit. You
don't have to be an ADCC world champion. You just got to be competent in what you're doing.
Yeah. But do you think that, would you say that the biggest issue insofar as those cities and those states that did defund the police was more so in the lack of resources, like having less cops? Because I remember early on in that, like you were seeing videos of like people making police calls and there just not being cops there to show up to calls. And so that might even affect, like, there's underreported crime at that point. There's people not being able to get help. Would you say that those were the biggest factors that were affected by a movement like that?
I would say a lot of them, like when I came on, to get a job in police work was very difficult.
Yeah.
It was challenging. Like you would go take the civil service exam and there'd be hundreds of people taking the civil service exam, maybe even thousands depending on what agency it is. Now, like, police departments are having trouble getting people to hire.
Yeah.
We have to kind of blame that on society.
Yeah.
Because you want to put them in a glass house. You don't want them to be good at what they do. You expect them to be perfect at what they do.
Yeah.
And in a human factor, there's no perfection.
No. Yeah.
So we have to understand that you can judge, and I want police to be professional, and I want them to have high standards, and I want them to be judged on being a good person and doing the right thing. But you have to understand, in these life or death situations, no one's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right? So understanding where they're working. How do you get as perfect as possible? How do you get as good at perfection? Is constantly seek training and constantly be the best person you can be, right? Look at us. Like, we were here in January. I had Matt and Dylan with me, probably two of the higher level jiu-jitsu guys on my cadre, right? And what were we doing? Seeking out Giancarlo to do privates. Why? Because we want to get better.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm not competing anymore. I'm 46. But I still roll every day with the guys. I still try to go into the gym and the guys that are competing, get them ready and try to give them good rolls and at least make them work.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to get better as best as I can because I'm teaching a solution to other cops, and I want to be on top of the game, the newest things. Like, your style is great for policing because you're working to win to get on top. You can play the bottom, but when you're on bottom, you're working to sweep or wrestle up and get on top again. You're great at getting behind people. Your takedowns are good. Your takedown defense is good. So, like, hey, let's go do these privates with a guy that understands, like, his style of training is what we're looking for in the environment of what we're doing in self-defense or policing, right? So it's like, we're not done learning. I retired.
Yeah.
I'm not done learning. I'm still shooting.
Yeah.
I'm still training every day.
Yeah, and you're training people.
I'm seeking out training. I'm paying to go to trainings. I'm paying to do privates. Like, that's what everybody else should be doing.
Yeah.
Is trying to get better.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm a black belt and train every day. I could say easy, I don't want to go do a private or pay for a private. You know how many thousands and thousands of dollars it cost me to get my black belt? How many tournaments I paid for, how many seminars I went to, memberships I paid for. Like, it's invaluable though.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't think about how much you pay for it, but then people are like, oh, a gym membership's $190 or $200 a month. That's a lot. It's not a lot for your life.
Well, yeah, exactly. Think about
it's not a lot to get charged because you panicked and shot someone you shouldn't have shot.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like,
Right,
think
like,
about how many situations in, like, you know, all your time in law enforcement has that paid you back 1,000 times over.
Dividends thousands of times. Like, I can't even tell you, like, the benefits of training outside of work that paid off for me inside of work now.
Yeah.
Like, just going back, and it's just like, I watch my body cams, and I've gotten some of my body cams, and I had lots of use of the force. And it wasn't because I would rather talk someone down, right? I would rather be like, this dude's a meth head. His hygiene would give most people nightmares, right? Like, I don't want to put inside head position on a dude with meth sores on his face. Yeah. But if I have to, so that I'm not in a worse position, I'm going to do that.
Right,
I know how to. But if I can be like, dude, and he was like, oh, if you didn't have that gun and badge, I'd beat your ass. You're right, you probably would, but let's not get you another charge. Let's just go take care of this one.
Yeah.
I would rather just get him cuffed and go.
Yeah.
Now, when I needed to handle business.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what happens is, like, police don't use the most reasonable amount of force necessary. They, either use minimum amount of force or less force than they need, and then it escalates up into a deadly physical force encounter, kind of like the one we talked about in the Charlotte County one.
Yeah.
Or we have, like, the George Floyd one,
Yeah.
okay? Like, be a good person. Like, he didn't want to be in a car, claustrophobic. Is he being cooperative? Not really, but do we really need to stay in the same position for 9 minutes on a handcuffed guy? No.
Yeah.
Are there better positions we go to? Yes. But that's almost like that opposite man syndrome, right? Like, there's a use of force in front of a crowd, and the crowd's telling me, you can't do that. I got a badge and a gun. You're not telling me what to do, so I'm going to stay right here and do that. Not thinking of what my actions are going to be.
Right.
Right? And now you're charged and you're in prison, right? Yeah. So it's like, use a reasonable amount of force necessary. Do the right thing, right? And you're going to stay out of trouble for the most part.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and that all comes down to, again, panic happens under stress. Stress happens, and then panic happens because we don't know what to do and we're not comfortable there.
Yeah.
If you don't panic, you're not going to stress out.
Yeah.
If you're stressed, you're not going to panic if you're training there and you're comfortable there.
Yeah.
It's just situations happen. It's another day. Hey, I've been here 100 times. I know how to do this, right? Like, I remember our team, our SWAT team, we had a barricaded subject that was a hostage with, like, a 12-year-old boy, right? And it was the mother's sons, it was her boyfriend had the son hostage, and she had run out, and he had like tried to slice her with a knife, and he was starting to kill the kid, and he was all coked up, and when he would drink coke and drink, he was crazy, and we dealt with him in the past, and we knew like this was going to be bad, and it was a long standoff, however it was, and then ended up being like, all right, we actually have to go in. Like, he's making threats that he's going to kill this kid now. We can't wait any longer. And we're getting nowhere on the dialogue, right? So we had like the arrest team, the first assault team ready. We had the secondary assault team ready, and it was a secondary apartment with only one stairway access. So we had a roof team coming up on a ladder to attack, so it was a whole ordeal, but like there was zero panic from any of the guys on the team. Everyone's like, we've trained for this situation. Now, hostage rescue is the hardest thing you're ever going to do in police work, right? It's the most things can go wrong. And I remember when the commander gave the okay to go, he's like, I'm holding control, no one move, it's on me. And then I remember when he did the okay to go, within 28 or 29 seconds, we had the kid back to the command post and safe, and the suspect in custody.
Yeah.
Now, the suspect got put in custody pretty much right away because he was just on the opposite side of the breach point, and it kind of like door like blew into him and knocked him down.
Yeah.
So they extracted the kid right away, which was in the room across from that door.
Yeah.
And then they just took him into custody. If he would have like ran back into the room, it would have just been a barricade. Now it's a completely different situation. Every guy on that team was there was no panic, and you saw no stress on those guys' face. It was like, we're going to save this 12-year-old kid today. And it's because we just practiced and trained enough that it was just, okay, we're finally getting to do a hostage rescue. Like, most teams never will do a hostage rescue. It's like, right? And the fact that we had to do it was like kind of crazy. And it was like, man, after we look back on it, I was like, man, that was insane.
Yeah.
What did we do well? What did we do that could have cost us and we can be better? Even though, hey, we rescued the kid.
Yeah.
We had him back within 20-some seconds. We had the guy in custody in that same amount of time. What didn't go as planned and that we can do better for in case this happens again? It went great, but there are things we probably could have been better on. Then now we're being hard on ourselves and we're critiquing ourselves and getting ourselves better. Every patrol unit should be doing that on their calls. That's why, I think our system has gotten so good is when I was working proactive patrol, it wasn't hard fighting bad guys, but I was like, oh man, that could have gone differently. But how can we tweak this? Hey, I mounted this guy. I almost got hit by this chick had a metal pole. Like, she could have hit me with that, right? Like, I couldn't disengage because the guy just was holding me. And I was in the mount, but I couldn't disengage fast. So I was like, all right, I got to start looking at this control position more of, okay, here's knee on top. Here's leg drag. I can disengage if I need to because secondary subject may be having some sort of weapon, those types of things. So it's like, now taking all that skill from the sports side, integrating it into what we do in law enforcement, and it's not hard to do, Giancarlo. It's not hard to do at all.
Yeah.
Like, it is getting guys to train, getting admins to train their guys, and it's all about leadership.
Yeah.
So like Captain Dave from Grand Rapids, Chief up in Grand Prairie, Texas. He's a black belt. He's got his own jiu-jitsu club in the police department, and those guys get paid to train. He's got like 60-some members of a department training jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Right? He's done some studies on how it's lowered the use of the force and injuries.
Yeah.
Captain Dave from Grand Rapids has went all EFC now. They had an incident where their guy ended up getting in an all-out fight and ended up shooting the guy in the back of the head. They're trying to charge him now. And that fight was 3 minutes and some seconds long. Like, the average human being fighting 3 minutes is a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't think it's a long time, but for the average human being, it's long.
It's long, yeah.
They've invested in going EFC. They've got their own grappling club now. Like, so there are admins and getting people in those positions that are making it happen. And I think you're going to see it grow. It's just the wheels of justice move slow.
I was in, like I said before, I was in Denmark, and I did a little class for the Danish police there.
Yeah.
I was in Israel also, and it wasn't specifically for cops, but we had some like police and military guys there, so I was training with them. And then like today we had some guys from Sweden. So you got guys from all over the world.
Yeah.
The Danish guys also knew you. So like worldwide, U.S., like different parts of the U.S., because I know it's different everywhere, and different parts of the world where you guys have trained people, have experience. Who would you say kind of maybe top three, and why, as far as like training and hands-on training and kind of like actually not just hands-on, but like all those elements that we talked about, those kind of four elements.
Yeah.
Where would you say kind of the best are, if you had to, maybe not in a specific order, but like top 3 to 5
I would
that
say
you know of?
the majority where there's the most departments that I see training, and when I go, the most guys train are probably located in Texas, Florida, and even some Nevada. And even though California is more on the liberal side as far as a state, they train a lot as police officers. Now, they're a huge state and they have lots of cops. So the majority of them that we may say are training, there's quadruple or more than that aren't training.
Yeah.
But like individual departments, now let's say like individual departments that I go to, like my old department, my buddy Joe, who's a black belt, and he was a state police for New York State Police, probably the second largest agency in the state of New York, minus NYPD. He would always come down to our department or to our gym and train because we were really close, like an hour and a half away. And, you know, we grew up training jiu-jitsu together. We were both cops, and he would come down and he's like, dude, the culture you guys have at this department is crazy. He's like, this is one of the best trained departments I've seen, you know? And it's just the culture that we installed. When they come in for field training, like we'd be like, hey, let's go to open mat today. We want to go shooting today on this day. Like, we just get them realizing that training was just part of what you do. Like Grand Prairie, right? They are training jiu-jitsu constantly because they have a jiu-jitsu gym now in their PD or a club that they can do. Grand Rapids since mid-2022 has gone pretty much all EFC and integrated in like a grappling club. And that's because their lieutenant, who's now the captain, has been in a place where he's doing that, right? Like I'm going there in December to do a level 2 and it's just private to his guys. So he's a department of like 350 guys. It's a mid-size, it's the second biggest city in Michigan. And he has 28 EFC instructors now. So those guys are teaching at the department regularly. They're going to train jiu-jitsu at the Grand Rapids Jiu-Jitsu Club. They're training on their own. He's instilling that culture, right? So I would say that, you know, Michigan State Police does a really good job too with training. I would say like in all 4, they're always bringing different people in to train up there. So they're doing really good. And it varies per department. But like if I were to say out of the states I go to where the most people train, specifically in grappling and even probably like range, I would say Florida and Texas are probably by far and most my open mats are the biggest. New York, I would say, is probably getting there on the DT side and the gun side, but that's because DCJS has done good at contracting cops that are good in those lanes to revamp those basic academy programs. And now that's becoming like the standard in those areas across the state minus New York City because they don't be governed by DCJS. They govern themselves. Now, they are starting to try to like do some of the stuff that DCJS is doing. So they are trying to just logistically with 33,000 cops, it's a nightmare. Trying to get things done in New York City isn't easy with like the city council and those types of things, right? Like they have a diaphragm law. Like their city council passed a law saying like you can't put any pressure on the chest or the back sitting, so you can't mount, you can't put a knee on the top, like because they think that it's just killing everybody. Right? Like we do this with kids in wrestling and jiu-jitsu every day across this country and as adults and no one's dying and training, right? So it's like that hampers and now handcuffs the cops, right? So like in New York City, you have to have like specific routes to be able to control someone where you're not doing like knee on top of the diaphragm. Now, can you go knee on top of the hips? Sure. Can I go chest to chest? Yes. But I can't back mount you.
Because that's another thing is like, and that's another thing I wanted to ask you because how much of that is just the people that are in charge of making up these laws just have no idea what they're talking about? And then how much does that affect training? A lot, I would assume. Because
so we'll talk on 2 aspects of it.
There's so many more efficient ways to subdue people. And another thing I wanted to ask you is like, what are your thoughts on choking?
So that's the second aspect. So control aspect is this narrative of we can't put pressure on the diaphragm. Front up or front back. Yes, you can. Okay. We can do that.
Did that come from the George Floyd situation, or was that like a catapult?
Well, the George Floyd situation set us back like a decade in police tactics. It really did, right?
I know.
And not to say that how he utilized his tactics and stayed in that for 9 minutes, like No one's saying what he did was not an overuse of force at that point, okay, especially because the guy's handcuffed. And handcuffs don't minimize, they don't take away danger. They minimize danger, right? I've seen people in handcuffs take cops' guns before, right? So, like, it's not always, there's no, like, hey, he's perfectly safe. But he's in handcuffs, he's like, why are we staying in this position? Do we need to actually stay here? Can we get him set up? Can we move to different positions? Can we put him on the side and control? If they're stomach down, can we actually, we're responsible for him in these cuffs. Can I assess his vital area stomach down? Not very good. So staying away from, can he breathe better or not? It's not ideal for what I need to do. Right. I need to control him.
It's not efficient.
Yeah, it's just not efficient. I need to control him. So the big aspect is like these laws that say you can't put pressure on the diaphragm, and it's just, it's nonsense. Okay. And, it's handcuffing police officers to now where they use less control, and now maybe it escalates up and gets to deadly physical force. Now let's get into choking. So the DOJ stance since the Floyd, the Eric Gardner thing in New York is in most states, in most departments, choking is now prohibited less than deadly physical force. So what they're saying is you can't choke someone until deadly physical force. So if all my other options have failed, tasers failed, hands-on failed, and I can't control this guy, I can't choke him until I can shoot him.
Yeah, which is, that's what I was going to say. It's
so
like,
if I shoot him, I'm not saving his life. But if I choke him, the overwhelming percentage that he's going to be alive after is super high. Right? So it's like, okay, if you want to take chokes and not put him in like a low level of force, let's move him into like intermediate force where like you go to your taser or you go to your baton. I can hit a guy with a baton, but I can't choke the guy.
That's what I mean. Like, so, and
it's
obviously
just nonsense.
It's ridiculous. And I can't think of a more efficient way to just subdue somebody, especially if you look at, like you talked about the women before, like put a situation where you have a girl who just has enough training against a dude who's bigger and stronger, and she's able to get behind him, and she is gonna have a hard time controlling that guy.
For sure.
And she can't shoot him. So why wouldn't she be allowed to choke him, put him unconscious, put him in cuffs, and then handle the situation?
And now what happens? Now maybe she gets reversed, or he starts overwhelming her, and then she ends up having to shoot him.
Even something
or he
as
takes her gun, or
stupid as
he
fucking freaks out and she fucking hits her head somewhere. She's unconscious. Now this is a huge problem that could have been easily solved. Like, I never really understood the choking thing, and I think it's
hard to understand it because there's no sense behind it.
The littlest amount of training and understanding, like, you don't even have to be put unconscious, but if you've ever been put unconscious, it's like a couple seconds and you're probably fine. But like, if you just understand that with just the littlest amount of training, it's probably the most efficient tool you have from a variety of different situations to subdue somebody. And it's like, there's just no logic behind it.
It's so bad right now. I've gone to certain departments, and I'm not going to name them, but I've gone to certain departments, some extremely large, some smaller, where in their general orders it says we are prohibited from using chokes. And they're under the thought that they can't even use it in deadly physical force because it says prohibited. And I'm like, so deadly physical force is by any means necessary. We don't train to run someone over with a car, but if you're shooting someone and I'm pulling up in a car and it's faster for me to run you over than get out and shoot you, I'm running you over the car to save somebody else's life. We don't train running you over with a car, but I can do that. Why? Because you're causing serious physical injury or death to somebody else, right? So I can do that, or to myself, right? To say that you can't choke someone but you can shoot them is the most mind-boggling thing I've ever heard in my life. And I've heard this a lot lately, right? And I'm like, you need to go to your legal team and need to be like, just because it says it's prohibited, in deadly physical force, if you're saying your general order for your department is prohibiting it in deadly physical force, you're going to cost lives rather than save lives.
100%.
Okay? Now, I don't even think it should be in deadly physical force. You and I, we train enough, we're educated, and the people making the decisions aren't educated in training how to choke somebody. They're just not, right? They've never probably been choked out. People freak out when they're getting choked out. Like, choking someone unconscious, taking them into custody is one of the safer things you can do. Right? So now, hey, I've gone hands-on and this has failed. My taser has failed. Right? My ASP has failed. I have no other ways to subdue this guy besides shoot him. What if I could just choke him?
And even what if you just didn't have the ability to get to your taser? A guy fucking tackled you to the ground. I mean, there's a million situations that you could, and again, it's so case by case because the variables are so unpredictable and there's so many of them. But like, that's such a valuable tool.
And I'll tell you what, we were really close as a law enforcement profession of getting vascular neck restraints, is what we call it. So, rear naked choke, I'm putting the forearm across the throat, more of like a trachea choke, airway choke. We were teaching vascular neck restraint, elbow down, shutting the blood off. That way I'm not affecting the trachea, I'm not causing damage to the trachea, shutting the blood off, gain compliance, releasing it, and then getting them in custody, right? We were so close to getting that on board in most states, most departments. Then the Eric Garner, George Floyd thing happened, set us way back.
Yeah.
I mean, we have doctors that are jiu-jitsu practitioners that have wrote papers saying like how safe it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But society doesn't reach out to those people. They probably don't even talk to the medical professionals about before they make these laws. They hop to what the narrative is. Oh, this guy died because he had a knee on his neck.
Yeah.
Okay, this guy died because they're saying, like Eric Gardner got choked. They had him in a headlock. Realistic, it wasn't even a chokehold. The guy, it wasn't even like a rear naked choke.
Yeah.
Or a vascular neck restraint. Now they're saying, oh, now everybody can't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like they're actually going to cost lives, because if you can't choke them and you have no other options, then you're going to resort to shooting that person, and they're most likely not going to survive a shooting.
But it's so crazy to me that why would creating a narrative and why would like social pressure be allowed to make those decisions?
One, political, but even more than political, I just think it's honestly that they don't know.
Yeah,
I don't think they know.
Which is why, like, just leave it
in that situation.
But like, leave it in the hands of the people that know. That's just like it's such a huge part of.
That would be common sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do a million people just crying about fucking, the one outlier video that makes it on social media have to dictate the laws for everybody else? And then it potentially puts cops' lives and civilian lives in danger. It just doesn't make any sense.
Sure, it puts the cops' life in danger. More so, it's probably going to even put the suspect's life in danger, which is what they're trying to make these laws to protect. They're actually doing the reverse effect of what they're trying to do. Yeah,
like choking a guy versus shooting a guy. Like, it just...
Could you imagine if I said, like, on national news, or like the Jocko, or say like a Joe Rogan podcast, and I explained why these are in place versus why they're not, people would be like, really?
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it, though.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Nobody talks about it. That's why all these podcasts I do with everybody, the one thing I bring up is we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
The lawmakers are doing this wrong. They're doing it actually backwards. It's actually causing more damage to the people they're saying they're protecting than it really realistically is.
How does that like get changed do you think it'll ever get changed?
I do.
Yeah.
I think as the pendulum swings back and forth, and say it goes way right and it goes way left, just like it does politically, I think the pendulum always comes back to common sense.
Yeah.
That is, just left of the fence, just right of the fence. The guy just left of the fence and the guy just right of the fence, neither of them want lawlessness. They both want to live lives. They both want to be able to afford things, have a nice life for their kids. We have the same goals in life. How we get there, we may have a little bit different ideas. But for the most part, there's more common sense there. You get way far left and way far right, like the radical decisions.
Yeah.
Neither of them are good.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like we need to come back to this common sense thinking of like, what are we actually making this law for? Are we just fitting the narrative?
Yeah.
Or are we actually trying to find a solution that's going to affect everybody involved? And that is the suspect, the civilians, and the police officers.
Yeah. It
right?
seems
like
like
that's what we want to do. We want to protect everybody's lives in this situation.
It seems like there's like a tug of war happening where like the common sense line is trying to get moved a little bit this way and a little bit that way. And it just depends on like who's in power at the local and then at the federal level. That just changes everything, where it's like, why that shouldn't be the dictating factor for those things.
We need common sense down the line. Hey, let's make common sense legislation, not common sense laws, and do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of looking at things politically, let's just do what the right thing is, as far as like, there's a thing called priority of life in police work. Mm-hmm. And that means if we have a barricade in the house and it's just a suspect, we're not going in there. The priority of life is us over him. Why are we going to go in and get in a shooting with him when there's no one in there to save but him?
Yeah.
We want him to come out. We're going to try to de-escalate and get him out. Now, if it's a hostage situation and there's a kid in there or an adult and he's trying to kill them, now we have to go in. Because the priority of life is the civilian. We're there to protect the civilian. Okay? So understanding that like priority of life. And it's like we need to make laws that protect everybody in that priority of life and be like objective about it, objectively reasonable about what we're talking about. Yeah. And again, it's like one side or the other is trying to like fit certain narratives. It's like, screw the narrative. Yeah. What is the right thing to do here? What is the best way to do it and solution that's going to protect the most people? And it's like putting chokes and deadly physical force is insane. Yeah. It's actually like reverse effect of what they want.
And it goes back to like, if you look at an incident like, you know, the two that we talked about, or just pick any incident that makes it out, that any incident that drives a narrative and then changes legislation. Right. Like rather than doing that, why wouldn't just changing the training be the biggest fact? Like they could have done X, Y, and Z better, so let's make them better at that, instead of saying, oh, now you can't do. So now you're just taking weapons away, or not weapons, but you're taking tools away that could be useful for cops. Sure. And rather than training them how to use them effectively, you're actually limiting them so they can do their job worse.
You're forbidding them for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that diaphragm law in New York City, that handcuffs the cops. Yeah. Like if you can control someone, you're gonna get them into custody faster. Yeah. So if they are having a mental episode, you're going to be able to get them help faster. You're going to be able to move them to a position to help them. Or if you're still fighting with the guy because you can't put positions, now that guy's still not in custody, you can't start giving him medical and helping him until he's in custody, right? So it's like, same with choking. And it's like, my goal in this whole thing now is like, hey, let's put best solutions out for cops to be safe for them, the civilians are protecting, and to make it the safest for the suspects that they're protecting, right? My goal now is, because this is already rolling and going good, right? Like, is to get to a platform where I have a platform to be able to talk to the people that actually make these irrational decisions and be like, this is why this is not good. Here's why we need to do it different. A lot of people will be like, oh, we're doing it. Why are you doing it that way? Because we've always done it that way. Terrible, terrible answer, right? Or why? I don't know. Yeah. Know why, and then put the liability on them, or explain to them why it's safer for everybody involved, and we're going to get traction. Yeah. It's getting that traction and getting them to the why. Like, a lot of people don't teach to the why. When you're teaching a position, you're teaching to a purpose and the why behind it, right? Mm-hmm. You don't just teach, hey, I'm going to go for the snatch single. You know, if you go for the snatch single, my 2 or 3 main counters, and you're going to the next, like if he counters it, say you go snatch single, you know I'm going to whiz and put my pants on, put my foot down, so you're now going to go to the body lock, right? Yeah. You have a purpose of what routes you're running. Yeah. If you don't have a purpose, you're just doing things, it's not as effective, right? Yeah. Yeah. So like building a system that has purpose is just like training to the why for like us in police work. The really common thing would be like the old police takedown would be like, hey, I'm going to get your arm, I'm going to turn your hand to the pocket, I'm going to put my forearm behind your arm and like drive you to the ground. Yeah. It's a terrible takedown. It's awful. It's terrible. But instead of me going into class and being like, I don't advise doing that. I think it's not good. It's terrible, actually. But if I don't explain why it's terrible, they're going to be like, oh, whatever. Yeah. Who's this guy to say differently? Yeah. Instead of going to like a true Russian or hug armbar 2-on-1 in wrestling, why is that so much better? Because I'm actually occupying the space. If I'm here, there's too much space. You tuck your elbow down, done. Merry-go-round, I'm not controlling any space. So again, I'm controlling space on one, I'm not controlling space on the other one. If I want to control someone, I want to take space away. Yeah. If I want to escape, I need to create space. Yeah. And so explaining the why sometimes to things has made it much easier for us to build retainment to our students, to get points across. Why do you not like that? And I'll say, I don't like that. I would never do it. You're a grown adult, you can do that if you want, but I don't suggest doing that, and here's why. It's not just because Jay said so. Okay, right, who's Jay? Who cares, right? Like, this is why. In my experience, I've seen this happen, both in the environment of policing and then in the sport world. And now you put them together, the ideas and experiences from them deliver my why of why it works or doesn't work. Yeah. And I think it's just, one, a collective moving forward with the guys that are training more, the community that is supporting police, or the community that's actually training too. Like, expressing more of like, hey, why isn't this happening? True police work comes back to training. Yeah, it does. We haven't fixed that problem. Hey, defund the police and we need to do more de-escalation training. So you're giving us 50 grand for the year and the only thing we can use that for is verbal de-escalation.
Yeah.
Okay, so when verbal de-escalation fails, we still suck our hands on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What if we use that $50,000 to work verbal de-escalation and our control tactics?
Yeah.
Because everything we do is dialogue.
Yeah.
Even when I'm fighting someone, I'm having dialogue with
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
right? Like, what's his actions? What do I want him to do?
Yeah.
You know? So I think it's a team effort. Again, like overwhelming majority of society supports police.
Yeah.
By far, the overwhelming majority supports the police because they don't want lawlessness. They don't want their house broken into. They want to send their kids to school and not worry about things.
You don't want to be in a world without cops.
You don't want to be in a world without that. But now we have to understand, like, cops aren't going to be perfect. And then look at, like, why they're not going to be perfect. One, they're human. There's a human being factor. They'll never be perfect. But we have to be really good.
Yeah.
Because we do have the ability to take people's civil rights away. We have the ability to take their freedom away.
Yeah.
Right? And we're giving them weapons. And then we don't train them well. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm hard on cops. I am hard on cops because, like, I've put the work in. I've put the work in to be, like, the best cop that I could be. One, respecting the people I was arresting, respecting the people that I'm protecting, and the people that I'm training. And, you know, my buddy Scott, he's actually deputy chief now of the department we work at. And if you ever listen to this, Scott, whoever field trained you must have had really good influence to get you that high up on admin. But he was one of my first trainees. Yeah. And now he's a super smart kid, like, and up through the thing. But, you know, when I retired, he had come in and said something, and I didn't really think about this, but, like, there was a good portion of my career where I made the most arrests in the department. I wasn't that cop that just had to go out and arrest phony because in high school I was getting stuffed in my locker. Like, I know I despise those cops, to be honest with you, right? Like, I was a cop because I decided I didn't want to sit behind a desk. I wanted to do something a little bit different every day. I always wanted to, and as growing up, I thought cops were like trained robots and like, you know, SWAT guys, and like, then you get in there and you're like, well, this is a little bit different. Yeah. And I'm like, how do I change that for me personally? And I arrested probably the most people in the department, the majority of my career, okay? Depending on what unit I was in and stuff, but like, or shift I was working. But Scott said, he's like, it's crazy because he's like, Jay, and on the street they would call me by my last name Wadsworth, but they would call me Wadsworth with like an F instead of a TH. Yeah. So the ongoing joke was, where's Wadsworth at, right? So Scott's like, it's amazing that this guy would arrest someone and fight with them. He would probably chase them and fight with them and bring them to jail. But then if they got arrested by someone else, they were asking for him. They wanted to talk to him. Yeah, yeah. And he's like, it's because he treated them with respect because he realized he knows they're not fighting Jay. They're fighting I'm just trying to get away. I'm trying not to go to jail. Yeah. So it's like, once I cuff him, I still have to deal with this guy, and I'm responsible for him all the way to the transport and in. Yeah. I might have to deal with him later on. How willing is he going to be to comply if you just treated him like shit? Yeah, and what if I have to deal with him in 2 months when he gets out? Yeah. Yeah. Right? Maybe so I always tried to look at it as like, I'm going to build a rapport with these guys, even if I fight with them. Listen, hey, I get it. I know it's not personal. Let's go get this taken care of. Let's calm down. Let's not give the next guy some trouble. You know, what can I do to make this process as easy as possible? It's not fun. I know you're getting your freedom taken away. But I would talk to people like that. And I'll tell you what, like, when I got moved from a patrol function to undercover drug, gun violence type unit, the amount of CIs that I could get and reach out to was overwhelming because I treated those people that I was dealing with throughout my career with respect. So you built a network, kind of. Built a network. Yeah. And your lifestyle is different than mine, okay? But as a person, I don't need to disrespect you for that. I might not agree with what you're doing, but I don't need to disrespect you for that. And I'll tell you what, it helped me multiple times in my career. It actually helped me from getting beat up probably by a bunch of guys one time. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it. You know, like, I'm one person. you're one person. If you get surrounded by 5 guys, you might get your fair share of licks in.
Yeah.
But you're probably gonna get your ass beat too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right? And I had built a good rapport because I was playing like flag football. And so a lot of guys I played flag football against in the leagues were like from the city, and they were running around in the gangs and the people that were good people, but maybe didn't have the best lifestyle choices. And I just remember it was a Hispanic community, and those communities are tight, you know. And it was a DV. I was the first one there, and I knew I shouldn't have went to the back of this complex because it's always a disaster by myself. I made a poor decision, did. And then I had like immediately like 4 or 5 guys surrounding me.
Yeah.
And like I called for backup right away, and backup there was like a minute away. But fighting 5 guys for a minute is not going to be good.
Yeah.
And one of the guys at this gathering was one of the guys who played flag football, and he came running over and got in the middle. He was like, "Hey, it's my boy. He's cool. He'll treat you guys good."
Yeah.
And then guys got there, and we treated him. We separated them. No one ended up going to jail. It was like a family argument, and we separated people, and they went. But like, I probably would have got my butt beat that day if he wouldn't have came in. And it was just because I never arrested him.
Yeah.
I just had been competitive and played against him in a flag football type league, and he knew I was a cop. He let me know when we were playing, "You're a cop."
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm a cop, you know. But like, not disrespecting those guys, and like you're out competing and being hard nosed with those guys. That kind of stuff goes a long way in just life, not even like in law enforcement, you know.
Yeah.
But I think again, it's everybody working together to get that change. It's not one company is going to do it. Not one person is going to be able to do it. Not one group or one state. It's literally got to be a collective group of people that decide, hey, we need legislation to make training mandatory. True police reform is training continuously in really good content.
Yeah.
That's range stuff. That is hands-on stuff, reality-based training, building clearing, even vehicle stop tactics, right? Like those types of things. For too long, police work is in silos. And that means I'm a gun guy. I only train over here. And I'm only a hands-on guy.
Yeah.
But if I'm only a hands-on guy and I get a gun problem that's at distance, I better be good at going to my gun.
Yeah, it's
vice versa.
It's a multifaceted job. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So yeah, I mean, you guys are doing an amazing job. Where can people find you and reach out for any of your courses or?
Yeah. So they can find us at EFCombatives.com or EFCombatives on Instagram. Same with YouTube. My personal page is WADSBJJ on Instagram. You know, our main platforms. And then, you know, like we just always want to say, like, as a company, we're always looking to get better. We're partnering with people and making relationships with people that are in our lane, out of our lane, community jiu-jitsu guys, right? Like I come here, I reach out to you, we'll do privates with you and train. And like, you know, if you guys are in the Austin area, like look up Giancarlo, get privates with him and his group. Like, the system they run is a really good transition over into what we do in police work as well. So like I really appreciate like your support for the law enforcement side and always treating my group with a lot of respect and having the time for us, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I really enjoy like the last 2 times I've gotten like front row seats to watching you at ADCC, which has been really nice, you know, and or respecting like how you train in your game and just as an overall person, like you know, I love it, and I hope you a lot of success in promoting podcasts and in your training and your teaching, and anything I can do to help you guys as well. Like, don't feel afraid to reach out, man.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. EFC Jay's huge supporter of jiu-jitsu. He sponsored me for ADCC, and like he said, he's been at the last 2 ADCC. So high-level black belt. He's got a bunch of high-level black belt instructors. Reach out to them, and really appreciate everything you're doing, man.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks
for coming on.
Of course.
That was fun. How long was that?
About 2 hours.
Oh, sweet.
We got a lot of shorts out of that.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, thanks.